Please subscribe to Bear Nerd Fun. Smash the like button. Goodbye.
Hail to all. We do not need. Hail to all. Now come on, Hollywood. Stop smelling your own farts. You might get mistaken for arse sniffers. Remember, when you go woke, you go broke. Hail. Hail to all, this is Bear at Bear Nerd Fun. Kathleen Kennedy on difficulty of making Star Wars sequel films. There's no source material. We don't have comic books. Lucasfilm President Kathleen Kennedy stated, the Star Wars sequel trilogy films are incredibly difficult to make because they don't have source material. They don't have comic books. Kennedy was asked by Rolling Stones if the final entry in Disney's Star Wars sequel trilogy was a particularly hard nut to crack. Well, to answer that, what about the EU, KK? What about the comic books that were written, KK? Wonder about that, huh? I think you opened your mouth and your brain just went right out it and flowed out like a vapor. So your brain became a vapor and went flying away. Tweet, tweet, tweet. Left all sense behind. Okay, she responded, every one of these movies is particularly hard nut to crack. There's no source material. We don't have comic books. We don't have 800-page novels. We don't have anything other than passionate storytellers who get together and talk about what the next iteration might be. Well, that's because they're ignoring the EU, because instead they just rather steal from it, change it a little bit, and call it nostalgia sandwich. And here, it's good for you. Eat it, take it. Yummy. I don't think so. That may as well be a shit sandwich. There we go. Well, this is a lie. There's no other way to describe it. It's a lie. Disney CEO Bob Iger admitted they received outlines from George Lucas about what the sequel trilogy would look like in his recent book. Yeah, KK, didn't you get the memo? You didn't get the memo? You didn't get the memo that Bob Iger wrote a book and said George Lucas wasn't happy because he gave you guys outlines and Iger put it on Front Street by writing an autobiography. Yeah. Front Street. Well, what do we have here? Aha. Bob Iger admits George Lucas felt betrayed with Disney's version of Star Wars. Let's see a little quote right here. At some point in the process, George told me that he had completed outlines for 3 new movies. He agreed to send us 3 copies of the outlines. One for me, one for Alan Braverman, and one for Alan Horn, who's just been hired to run our studio. Alan Horn and I read George's outlines and decided we needed to buy them, though we made clear in the purchase agreement that we would not be contractually obligated to adhere to the plot lines he'd laid out. So there you go. There you go. Not only did Disney have Lucasfilm outline, but they also had access to a plethora of novels, video games, comic books about Star Wars. They had source material. They had comic books. And they had lengthy novels. Yeah, there's all this material out there, and Kathleen Kennedy comes out and it's like, what does she live in isolation? She never freaking picked up a freaking book about the history of Star Wars? They have them. They have books that talk about everything that's happened in Star Wars. I'm pretty sure they do. I mean, you go to a bookstore, you go find Star Wars, and there's all kinds of Star Wars books that were written. I mean, come on. Don't you frequent your local Barnes & Noble? Dark Horse Comics began publishing Star Wars comics in 1991 with Dark Empire, Star Wars Tales of the Jedi, Empire's End, Crimson Empire, Jedi Academy, Leviathan, Dark Forces, Jedi Knight, Mara Jade, By the Emperor's Hand, and more. Before Dark Horse Comics began publishing Star Wars comic books, they were published by Marvel Comics. The original Marvel Star Wars series was the first published in 1977 and ran through 1986. There were 107 issues total. Interestingly enough, Star Wars number 49, published in April 1981, was titled The Last Jedi. There you go, folks. The Last Jedi. Seems they got the idea from there, but yet they didn't want to come out and say, oh, we knew all along. I knew all along. I just didn't want to admit that it was there. Yeah. Freaking idiots. You had a freaking wet paper bag. Easy to get out of, and you couldn't get out of that. There are also plenty of Star Wars novels, maybe the most famous of the Thrawn trilogy, written by Timothy Zahn, that includes Heir to the Empire, Dark Force Rising, and The Last Command. I've read every single one of these books. That's right, they literally took a character from a novel and stuck him in canon TV show. Yeah, I've seen that. Okay, I just pulled up one of my books that I have, an ebook. Star Wars Legacy of the Force, Bloodlines. Heron Trevis. Yeah, it's about Boba Fett. Yep, it's about Boba Fett. Now, if anybody likes those particular movies, oh, what's this? Oh, Star Wars Legacy of the Force, Invincible, by Troy Denning. Oh, and what's this right here? Oh, Star Wars Legacy of the Force, Fury, by Aaron Alston. Oh, and what's this? It's a Mara Jade book. It's called, Mara Jade's in this. Star Wars Legacy of the Force, Sacrifice. So there you have it. Plenty of source material. And oh, look, right here, look. There's another one. Star Wars Legacy of the Force, Tempest. Oh, and what's this? Here's another one. Inferno. Star Wars Legacy of the Force, Inferno. Shall I go on? Star Wars. Fate of the Jedi. Ascension. Where Darth Caedus, kills you-know-who. Plenty of source material. They've even stolen from it. I've made some videos and pointed that out. This also introduced a Hammerhead-class cruiser ship in Rogue One. The ship was first introduced in Star Wars lore in 2003 video game Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic. However, there was also the Jedi Academy trilogy by Kevin J. Anderson, all the Jedi Apprentice books, The Last of the Jedi by Judd Watson, and Rebel Force books by Alex Wheeler, and Galaxy of Fear series by John Wyndham. There are literally dozens, if not hundreds, of Star Wars novels that Disney could have pulled from. They also had a prequel and sequel trilogies to look at as well. In fact, one could argue that The Force Awakens is a beat-for-beat remake of the original Star Wars movie. Why, looky that. Look. See that? Look at that. Really good music soundtrack they use on this one. The Force Awakens and A New Hope are the same movie. Man, I just watched some of the clips on this, and I mean, you don't even have to play. You can just move the mouse, click on a spot. Look at that. Look at that. That's amazing. They freaking copied it frame for frame. They copied The Force Awakens frame for frame, damn near. That had to have been a lot of thought going through that. Despite the obvious lie, Kennedy continued to detail the process Lucasfilm went about to create the sequel trilogy. Yeah, copy it frame from frame. She argues this is a very small list. And I would argue that the list is very small. People who really do have the sensibilities about these kind of movies. So, then the experience and the ability to handle how enormous a job these movies are, so we can try to be as thoughtful as we possibly can making these choices. So just admit it, KK, you're a hateful, bitter person, and you hate men. Because look at all the men that got treated like crap in The Last Jedi. And in some cases in The Force Awakens. More so in The Last Jedi. Man, bad propaganda crap. I don't buy this argument either. The Marvel Cinematic Universe films are arguably just as big as Star Wars films, and they are finding new talent all the time. Before Captain America, The Winter Soldier, Joe and Anthony Russo had predominantly done TV series. They would go on to direct Captain America Civil War, Avengers Infinity War, and Avengers Endgame. Before James Gunn did Guardians of the Galaxy and subsequently Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, he directed Slither and Super and 8 episodes of TV series short called PG Horn. He's not working on Suicide Squad and will be working on Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Before Jon Favreau directed Iron Man, he had directed Elf and Zathura, a space adventure along with a few TV movies. He went on to direct Iron Man 2, Cowboys, Aliens, The Jungle Book, and The Lion King. Black Panther director Ryan Coogler had only 2 major directing credits before he did Black Panther. He had done Creed and Fruitvale Station. Black Panther did pretty well at the box office and was a solid entry into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. However, in the sensibilities she's talking about is wanting to destroy the character of Luke Skywalker. She's probably right. It's a small one. Kennedy continues stating that some people get overwhelmed with the enormity of Star Wars. I would also argue that sometimes people get involved in the normal development process and then they realize, oh my god, this is so much more than I ever imagined. So it's pretty common that when you're working on movies, you're not making choices and decisions that necessarily work out exactly the way you want from the get-go. It's been an evolving process that lots of people, lots of opinions, and then you try to shape something into what it eventually becomes. Huh. So she details that J.J. Abrams wished he directed all 3 of the Star Wars films, but says that would not have been really physically possible. So I feel really fortunate that I've worked with so many great people that have been absolutely committed, J.J. being one of those. He's a huge fan, incredibly passionate about Star Wars, and been from the moment he and I sat down and started talking about this, and the more he got involved and more excited he became. So I think if you ask him today, he probably wishes he'd been in a situation where he could have done all 3. But as I said, these are huge projects, so it's very difficult unless there's 3 or 4 years in between. It's not really physically possible. What do you make of Kathleen Kennedy's comments? Do you think her lie about not having source material is an attempt to soften the blow of potential disappointing story in Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker? Interesting. Now, come on, Hollywood. Stop smelling your own farts. You might get mistaken for arse sniffers. Remember, when you go woke, you go broke.
Please subscribe to Bear Nerd Fun. Smash the like button. Goodbye.
Say hello. Hello. Say hello. Say nerd fun. Nerd fun. Nerd fun. Say goodbye. Goodbye. Hail